Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending upon where you are at today. We are so excited to have you all here for our November student webinar. Today, we are going to be focusing on navigating FAFSA and finding scholarships. So, my name is Elena Carroll, and I'm here from Upswing. I'm joined today by Simone, who is also from Upswing, and our very special guest speaker, Jessica Arulanandan from MOS. And Jessica is here today to talk to you all about filling out your FAFSA, how to find scholarships, and she's got a lot of really great advice for all of you. And we are so excited to have you here today. We want to remind you that today's webinar will be recorded. So if you have to leave early or if you aren't able to, watch everything today or you want to rewatch it later, we'll send out the recording with the deck via email. So just keep an eye on your email. Also, we would encourage you to ask any questions that you have in the Q&A as we go along. You can also post questions in the chat. We're going to leave about 15 minutes at the end to try to answer any questions that you may have. And then last but not least, before I turn it over to Jess, I just want to remind everybody that we're here to learn and grow together. So everybody here is, in the same boat in terms of wanting to learn more about the FAFSA and finding scholarships. So we just ask you to be kind and courteous to your peers here today as we move through this information and again, try to answer any questions that you may have along the way. So welcome, and without further ado, I will hand it over to Jess from MOS.
Hi, Elena. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the intro and so excited to be here to talk about financial aid and FAFSA with you all. I know last year the FAFSA changed and everyone tried to make it better and faster, and there have been a number of hiccups. And unfortunately, I think there will still be hiccups this year, but that's why we want to have this webinar to make sure that you all know what you need to do and how to navigate some of those challenges that may or may not come up. So with that, let's get started. So this is our agenda for today. First, we're going to talk about FAFSA. Then we're going to talk about negotiating your tuition. And this is something you may or may not know about, but is a really useful tactic in getting more money from the federal government, your state, and from your school. And then we'll talk about finding scholarships, specifically private scholarships, and then we'll open up the floor to you all to ask any questions you may have. A quick intro on me. So yes, my name is Jessica. I'm head of operations at MOS. I sort of run the day-to-day of the business. I graduated from Stanford with a major in economics and a minor in management science and engineering. I started my career in finance. So I worked in investment banking. It's sort of like what you imagine Wall Street is. And I actually did it in New York, which was a fun experience. I'm from California, so New York is very different. And then I worked in private equity investing. So that's sort of like flipping houses, but with companies. Did that down in LA. And for the past 3-4 years, I've been at MOS, started in product, wore a number of different hats across other functions. And yeah, now run operations. I'm happy to talk at the end to you about any career questions or job questions you may have. All right, so starting with the FAFSA. You all, I'm sure, have heard of the FAFSA. It stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And I'm sure you've heard this a number of times, but it truly is the most important financial aid form that you must fill out. And even if you think that your household might earn too much money to qualify for the FAFSA, or you think the form is too long, or you have all of these unique situations, which hopefully we'll address in this presentation, you should absolutely fill out the FAFSA. While I did mention that the FAFSA has had a number of hiccups, it is significantly shorter. It's about 35, 36 questions this year. It allows you to link to the IRS so you can automatically upload any tax information. That way you don't have to go through your tax returns and upload things manually. And you can see here in this table, there are a number of different grants and large amounts that you can get from the FAFSA. So it truly is the most important form. Also because the FAFSA usually determines your eligibility for state aid. So your state, like if you're from California like me, you don't have an additional form to fill out. You just have to fill out the FAFSA, and then the state gets that information from the federal government, determines how much aid you get from there, and then your school gets that information too. And Elena, we can probably share a PDF version of this deck later, so that any students who want to look at this later, they can click on these links and see more of the detailed information.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So should I submit the FAFSA? Yes. It doesn't take that long. It can allow you to get so much more aid from so many different sources. Sometimes even private scholarships require the FAFSA. Whenever anything says that it's based on financial need, a lot of times that means that they will want to see your FAFSA. So it's very important to fill it out. Also, while at MOS, we highly encourage students to maximize how much free money they can get. So that's grants and scholarships. The FAFSA does enable you or grant you access to federal loans. And while loans are obviously not the cheapest option to pay for school, sometimes it is sort of a necessary evil. And if you do have to take out student loans, try to get ones from the federal government first. Those are the cheapest ones. So those will have the lowest interest rates, and you could even have it where they're subsidized, meaning when you are in college, there's no interest that accrues on the loan. And it's like you took out all this money during college to pay for college. And then after you graduate, that's when you actually have to start paying back the loan. So the FAFSA is very important for grants, for scholarships, for state aid, for institutional aid, and for loans if you're at the point that you do need to take out loans. So who can submit the FAFSA? So absolutely US citizens, you'll need a valid social security number. Eligible non-citizens, so these are people with green cards. There are a variety of different immigration statuses. And even if you're, and we'll go over this too, but if your parents don't have social security numbers, but you do, you can still submit the FAFSA. And there's a link here that includes more about different FAFSA requirements. If you are in college already, you must maintain satisfactory academic progress. So usually that means maintaining a college GPA of 2.0 or higher. But if you have experienced extenuating circumstances, you've been going through certain hardships, whether that's emotional, mental, physical, anything else that has led to you falling out of satisfactory academic progress, your school will have a process called an SAP appeal, where you can explain what happened, and then your school will allow you to still get your financial aid, even if your GPA is below that. So that is also something to keep in mind, since I know that unexpected emergencies might always come up. And then how to submit your FAFSA. So you need to create an FSA ID if you are a dependent and you are applying with parents or guardians. They will also need to create their own FSA IDs. And you can add up to 20 schools to your FAFSA. So if you are attending community college right now, you are a sophomore and you're not sure where you want to go next year, if you're transferring to a four-year college, you can add up to 20 schools. And even if you're not sure you're going to apply to them or not, it's free to add all of these schools, and you would rather them have your information just in case, rather than having to send it later on. There's also a FAFSA prototype. So you can click the link here. You have to use this password, prototype 2526. And so you can see what the different questions are. The FAFSA is not open yet. It should be open sometime in December, hopefully, if the government is able to launch when they say that they are launching. But in the meantime, you can explore the prototype, familiarize yourself with the questions that they're going to ask, and then also prepare any documents or financial info that you may need. So yeah, this is when FAFSA gets a little bit complicated. One thing is if you're not sure about your dependency status. So if you file as a dependent, like I mentioned earlier, your parent or guardian will also need to file a FAFSA and sign it and submit it. If you are an independent, That means that you are older than 24, you're married, you're pursuing a graduate degree, you're on active duty, you have children or dependents, you're estranged under legal guardianship, an orphan, ward of the court, emancipated minor, homeless, or at risk of homelessness. So a bunch of different situations where you might file as an independent and not need to submit your parents' info. There are some things called dependency overrides. This is a niche situation where maybe you do have parents, you don't necessarily qualify as an independent on these terms, but for whatever reason, maybe you're not receiving financial support from your parents. And so you can try to file a dependency override with your school so that you can submit the FAFSA on your own. And then the federal government, state government, school determines your eligibility for financial aid just on you and any income or assets you may have, not including your parents. That's one thing. If your parents won't provide their information, which I know sometimes can be the case, we've seen that with some of the students we help at MOS, you can actually select yes to a specific question on the FAFSA. You can submit your FAFSA without their information. You won't be eligible for grants or need-based aid, unfortunately, but you could still be eligible for unsubsidized loans. And like I mentioned earlier, the federal loans are the cheapest option when it comes to loans. If your parents are divorced or separated, you should use the information of the parent you've lived with for more time over the past year. If it's about equal, then you base it off of financial support over the past 12 months or so. And then a couple other edge cases. If you or your parents are undocumented, so if you're eligible, but your parents aren't, you can just enter all zeros for your parents' social security number. You can still submit the FAFSA. If you are undocumented, you are unfortunately ineligible for federal aid, but there are a number of different states where you can submit a different form and still get state aid. So California, Texas, New York, Washington, Oregon, New Jersey, Minnesota, Maryland, Connecticut, New Mexico, and Illinois all allow students without social security numbers to still get state aid. And then, yeah, if you've had any income changes or special circumstances, so the FAFSA uses the income information from 2 years ago. So the FAFSA that's about to open is a 25-26 FAFSA, and it will use the income information of 2023. Obviously, a lot can happen in a year and a half, 2 years. And so maybe your income has changed or your household income has changed. There are a number of different hardships that can happen. Like maybe there was a death in the family and you had large funeral expenses or big dental health medical bills, or a parent lost a job. Those are situations where if your income drop is large enough, usually about 11 or 12% from what it used to be in 2023, then you can submit or you can request a professional judgment review from your school's financial aid office. And you'll need to provide documentation of these financial circumstances. So any receipts or bills or tax returns or unemployment statements. And then usually that means they will consider you for additional financial aid, even if your FAFSA says one thing. And then the last situation is if your FAFSA is selected for verification. This can be randomly selected or due to inconsistencies. This actually happens fairly often. I think like 1 in 3 FAFSAs get selected for verification. And all you really have to do is provide some additional documents to your school. Your school reviews them and like verifies that things are fine. And then you can kind of proceed. So if your FAFSA does get selected for verification, what you'll see in the student aid portal is like some asterisk. And then if you follow the asterisk, you'll see that you've been selected for verification. Check with your school for what you need to submit. And please try to do that as soon as possible because you do want to get your FAFSA processed early, since a lot of funds, especially need-based aid like the FSEOG, is first come, first serve. And so, yeah, FAFSA deadlines, important to keep in mind. December, the FAFSA should open. Last year, The government said that FAFSA would open in December, and it literally opened on December 31st. So hopefully it opens a little bit sooner than that. I don't know anyone on New Year's Eve who's like ready for the FAFSA or ready to do the FAFSA, but might happen again this year. We'll see. And then there are a number of state-specific program deadlines and priority deadlines. So I listed a few here since I know some of the schools that Upswing works with are in these states. So for Texas, you need to submit your FAFSA by February 15th. Or I shouldn't say you need to, but you absolutely should. These priority deadlines often are the cutoff for when you will be considered for state aid or institutional aid. So we've seen a number of students who are from Texas and maybe they had FAFSA delays and they weren't able to submit the FAFSA until May of last year. And now we've had a lot of back and forth with their school trying to explain to the school why the student wasn't able to submit the FAFSA before the priority deadline in February and why they should still deserve aid. But save yourself a lot of that hassle and back and forth and just keep these priority deadlines in mind and try to get the FAFSA done before then. And then the FAFSA is open for a year and a half, basically. So it'll open in December and then it'll close June 30th, 2026. But you do have to submit the FAFSA every single year that you expect to get financial aid. And so when you submit the FAFSA, it's for next year's aid. So you all submitting FAFSA, the 25-26 FAFSA, will be to determine your eligibility for financial aid for the next school year. And all right, Elena, should we pause for any questions on FAFSA or should we continue through?
Hey, that's a great idea, actually. We have a couple of questions noted in the Q&A, which I think I can actually address because they're related to the actual presentation itself. So just as a reminder, we will send out the recording to this presentation. We can also make sure that we send out the PDF with all of the links. So Katie is asking about the link to check out the FAFSA prototype. And additionally, Annabelle is asking about accessing the slideshow to use the links. So we will be able to send those out and give everybody access to those links. Additionally, there was one question in the chat, just kind of regarding, what's going to happen, now with the election being over and a new president-elect coming into place. They were curious just how that may affect the FAFSA. So I don't know, Jess, if you want to address that.
Yeah, happy to. I think there's been a lot said before the election that Trump said he's going to disband the Department of Education. I remember from his first presidency, he said a lot of things. Some things happened, some things didn't. It's really hard to know at this point what will happen. But I think with millions of students depending on financial aid from the government, from the state, I would find it very difficult for any legislation to be passed that so negatively impacts so much of the country. So I unfortunately can't say for sure who knows what he will do, but I would imagine for at least for this year, the FAFSA is going to open. Maybe there won't be any more changes for it. Maybe they might even simplify the process further, but students will always need financial aid. And it's one of the things that the government has always provided. I would be shocked if they stopped. I see another question about I applied before and was denied and wasn't sure why. I'd be happy to talk to you about that, or you could talk to one of our advisors on MOS about the specifics. I don't know what it means. I was denied by the FAFSA, but maybe it fell into one of the different categories we talked about. But you can always email support@mos.com or download MOS. You could work with a human advisor on our premium service and they can walk you through some of those things, or you can just use our free version, which has an AI advisor to get some of those questions answered.
Great, thank you. We also have some specific questions in the Q&A from two people regarding the FAFSA. So the first question says, if I used my dad's taxes for FAFSA, but I'm currently working, should I include my taxes on my FAFSA?
Yes. So the FAFSA does look at your assets, and if you are a dependent, also your parents' assets. So there's an option, you'll see this in the prototype, for you to connect to the IRS's DRT, data retrieval tool. Basically, I think you put in your social security number and they use that to tie your tax filing to your FAFSA. And so that should be a pretty seamless process. So you'll do that, and then your dad, when he creates his FSA ID and goes to complete his portion of your FAFSA, then he'll also link his tax information. And then, will my marriage
Great.
on October 24th increase my student aid for the spring semester? She has had zero income. I am actually not sure about the specifics. I know that with your marriage, if you are filing for the FAFSA, for the 25-26 FAFSA, that means that you will be filing as an independent. So I'm not sure how that will impact things, unfortunately. I think it might, but can't say for sure. Is there any difference in filling out the FAFSA when transferring to a school out of state? Will you automatically state aid the state you're transferring to? That is a great question. So the question is there any difference in filling out the FAFSA when you're transferring to a school out of state? There is not a difference. All you would do for the FAFSA is fill it out as you normally would and add all of the schools that you're applying to, and definitely the one that you're planning on transferring to your FAFSA. You probably won't be considered for state aid in the state you're transferring to. So state aid is determined based on residency, and usually residency means you've lived in that state for 12 months. So if you are living in Texas and you want to go to school in Georgia, you can't apply, you wouldn't qualify for Georgia state aid because Georgia state aid is for Georgia residents. But you should see if there is a state aid application for Texas, and sometimes states will still give you funds to go to school out of state. It's not often, but sometimes there are different exceptions, different grants. So I would look into that, but yeah, you probably wouldn't qualify for state aid in that new state because you're not a resident. Every time I filled out my FAFSA form, it never asked for my taxes. That is surprising. It should have asked for taxes. I don't want to get too in the weeds with your specific situation during this whole webinar in front of everybody, but please email us at support@mos.com, kind of explaining what your situation is specifically, and someone will help you troubleshoot that. Are there any circumstances in which my parent could use their 24 tax information instead of 23? So that's what we talked about before, of if your income has dropped or your household has experienced any hardships, you will still need to submit your 23 tax information. I think because the taxes for 2024 were just submitted, I think it's too slow or like too late in the government systems to be based off of that, which is why the FAFSA is always based off 2 years prior. But that's where you can go to your school and request like a financial reconsideration or whatever the term is to explain the income drop. And again, if the income has changed 11 or 12% from what it was prior, you usually will, that will be considered enough of a threshold that you should be considered for more financial aid. And then my state asked for 22 tax return for 25 academic year, why this might be. Yeah, so that is exactly what I'm talking about. Your FAFSA uses 2 years prior. So 2024 to 25 academic year, the first year in that is 2024. So 2024 minus 2 is 2022. I graduate fall 2025 from community college. Do I need to have my university ready accepted before applying to FAFSA? No, you don't. So that's where the flexibility of being able to add up to 20 schools to your FAFSA is really useful. You can just, even if you don't know which school you're going to be going to, add as many as you like, up to 20. And if and when you are accepted to those schools, because you've already added them to your FAFSA, they'll receive your financial information so that when you're accepted, they can also determine a financial aid award package for you. So you don't need to be accepted to a school to send them your FAFSA. So the FAFSA for 25-26 is based on income from 2023. Yes. The 25-26 FAFSA is based on 2023 income. What is some information related to people who complete FAFSA don't take advantage of? Didn't know you have a huge expense for feudal reading year of. Someone check the income drop and provide more aid. I think that's probably the biggest piece of information that people don't realize. If your FAFSA doesn't accurately reflect your, so when you submit the FAFSA, you get this number called SAI, Student Aid Index, and that shows basically where you fall within your ability to pay for college. It ranges from negative 1,500 and doesn't have a cap. So if you have an SAI of $50,000, the government essentially thinks that you can pay up to $50,000 a year towards school. So that's very high. If you have an SAI of 0 or negative 1,500, that means you are not able to pay any money towards college. And so you do need support from the federal government, state government, your school. I think the biggest thing is that people don't realize that your SAI can be changed, and it can be changed when you have had these hardships or changes in income. And so that's when it's really important for you to work with your school's financial aid office and explain to them the situation so that they can update their information, your information on their end, and award you more aid. Anything that can be done with state aid because my income has changed since 2022. So if your income has changed, I would work with your school to update your SAI on your FAFSA. And then when your FAFSA SAI is updated, your state aid should also be updated. So let's say you submitted the FAFSA, it said that your SAI is $10,000, but really it should be 0. So submit the documents, work with your school, and then they will update your FAFSA, and then your SAI ideally would drop to 0, and then that would change your eligibility for federal aid and state aid, and that should grant you more money. We've seen this happen a lot of times, but I will also say that that process is not one and done. It does require a good amount of back and forth with your school, which is actually what we'll get to in this next section. So with that, let's discuss negotiating tuition. So a lot of people don't know this, and this is sort of one of the secret sauces of MOS, that you can negotiate your tuition and the first financial aid offer you get is not final. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but yeah, so special circumstances and hardships. Here is a list of some examples. This is not an exhaustive list, but basically anything that has caused your household's income to change could be considered as a special circumstance or hardship. I would say if it's a small expense, like maybe $1,000, but your overall household income is $100,000, that might not be considered enough. So that's why usually schools and the government look at an income change of 11 to 12%. But I would say that that is not a hard and fast rule. That's just a rule of thumb. So what you can do is explain your unique situation to the financial aid office, explain what the special circumstance was, how much money it costs, how it's impacting your ability to pay for financial aid. And ideally the school will understand that usually they're able to find extra money to give you based on this, and then help you afford college a little bit better. So lower household income, that's pretty straightforward. If your parents lost a job, you had your hours cut, or maybe your parent lost a job, found a new one, but the new job has a lower pay. These could all be means to negotiate, or these could all be grounds to negotiate your tuition. Missing aid. So this usually requires you to have a good knowledge of what you actually qualify for, which can be really confusing. Like, government websites are not designed by Apple. They're very difficult to read, very difficult to navigate. But if you are able to understand which federal grants you qualify for and which state grants you qualify for, and you don't see those on your financial aid offer, you can actually negotiate for those grants. And that is actually one of our most successful tactics, where on MOS. Even if you're on the free version, you can take a quiz, see which state grants you qualify for and about how much you should be getting for each school. And then if you don't see that grant on your aid offer, we give you an AI drafted letter to send to your school. So that way you can like convince them to give you this aid. And it's literally just a letter to your school saying, hey, based on this situation, my SAI is this, and I'm from this state, I should be getting this grant. Like, I would very much appreciate if you would award me this, as I love this school, but it is quite expensive and I'm trying to maximize my grants and avoid student loans or something like that. Obviously, the letter that we give you in MOS is much more eloquent than what I just said, but that's the gist of it. And then, yes, lost financial aid due to falling below satisfactory academic performance. I touched on this earlier, but what you can do is talk to your financial aid office, explain the situation, why you fell out of satisfactory academic progress, and then also outline the steps that you're taking to improve your grades. And sometimes they will be able to grant you your financial aid back, even if your GPA is still below that threshold. Availability of emergency funds. So we saw this a lot during COVID, and it's less so now, but sometimes there still are funds available. And you can ask your financial aid office if they have any remaining funding. So the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, or HERF funds. Yeah, this was really big in like 2021, 22, less so in 23, but we have seen a couple students who've asked their school for it and actually gotten funds from this pool. So some schools do have remaining funds. And then irrelevant fees. So we've seen a lot of students who are maybe living at home and have a car, and so they drive to and from school, but then on their tuition bill, there's like transportation fee, or there's a healthcare fee, but the student isn't a member of the school's healthcare program. These are fees that you can usually get waived from your school to lower your tuition bill. Again, like anything that you can do to show that you aren't using these features and that you have significant financial need and can't afford this, or that like any dollar helps, usually is enough to convince your school to waive those fees and kind of give you a tuition discount. All of these are legitimate grounds for negotiating your tuition, but I do want to emphasize that it is a difficult process. It does require a lot of back and forth between you and the school. And what we've even seen is a lot of schools just have an automated rejection letter. Like one time I was talking to a high school senior, and they used the automated negotiation letter to send a letter to, I forget what school, but this was a high school student not attending that college, but sent a negotiation letter to them. And the school sent back an automated response like, oh, like, thanks for your enrollment. Unfortunately, we can't award you more aid. But the student wasn't even accepted there. So that just goes to show that school financial aid offices are very busy. They are probably going to say no the first time, second time, third time, but closer to the fourth or fifth time, that's when you really start to get heard, and they somehow find hundreds or thousands of dollars in the couch cushions. So just be persistent when you're negotiating, because this is a successful tactic. It just requires a lot of resilience and perseverance. Okay, and then how to negotiate your tuition. Yeah, I think I talked about a lot of this. Introduce yourself, talk about the financial aid you've received and how much you still have left to pay. Explain why it's difficult to cover this remaining outstanding balance. Usually, schools will say that you can take out loans, and your rebuttal to that can be, I'm trying to avoid like taking out student loans because I know how detrimental they can be to my financial future. I'm trying to avoid having mountains of debt when I graduate. And yeah, just keep trying. Sometimes schools will also say, oh, like, check out private scholarships here. And you can say, I am checking out private scholarships. I have applied to a number of them, but while I wait to hear back, like, this tuition bill is due sooner. And so would much appreciate any help you can provide. And I would say start with your school's financial aid office. You might get an automated response, reply again to that, try to keep talking, or even go into your school's financial aid office now that school is in session, or like set up a meeting with someone there. or have a phone call with someone there. And if all that back and forth doesn't work, you could try contacting the director of financial aid. Usually we tell students to save this as a last resort because the director of financial aid is kind of the end all be all. Like the buck stops with him. If he says no, then no one else is going to say yes. So you want to make sure you've exhausted all other options before going to someone so senior. And so, yeah, like I mentioned, MOS also for free does write personalized negotiation letters for you. You can take a quiz, provide additional details about yourself, like if you're a member of any clubs or you've won any awards, or if you do any extracurricular activities like volunteering. And we kind of use that information to craft a letter that you can send to your school. We provide the email address if you don't know what it is, and you can send it to just begin the conversation with your school on negotiating a lower tuition. And we've had a lot of success with this tactic. On average, students have gotten an additional $3,000 in financial aid, which is fantastic. But again, it does take a lot of back and forth. So don't be deterred if after your first time negotiating, your school says no. Please keep trying because it will work eventually. And so, yeah, just to kind of go over what the different sources of financial aid are. The federal government, you have to submit the FAFSA for it. State government, you do have to submit the FAFSA. Sometimes you have to do an additional form or create an account elsewhere. And then your college, this is based on the FAFSA. So even if you have a high household income, so you don't qualify for any need-based aid from the federal government or your state, a lot of times schools will still have merit-based financial aid. But if you don't submit the FAFSA, you're not going to get the merit-based aid. So you do need to submit the FAFSA. And then, yeah, once you're accepted into a school, you get a financial aid offer or award letter. Sometimes it's emailed to you. Sometimes you have to check your school portal like eCampus or Canvas, and then review it for any missing grants or scholarships. Check that all the fees are relevant. You can try to negotiate on any of those things. You can also explore work study positions where basically you work at an approved job on campus, and instead of getting paid money, it just lowers your tuition bill. It kind of counts as financial aid on, or grants on your bill. And then, yeah, private scholarships where there are opportunities year round. And there are a number of different sites, MOS included, that aggregate scholarships from all over the country and match you to them and help you actually apply. We actually just released this fun new one-click apply feature where, yeah, you can get matched with scholarships, tap to apply, and then you're done. So that's also fun. I think this is, yeah, the end of this section. So we can pause and answer any questions. So my mother renovated the house, made a lot of damages. Mom had to repay other people to make it. Is this enough of a reason? I would say yes. I think those are substantial expenses. And if you have the actual amounts that your mother paid to renovate the first time plus renovate the second time, that could be enough grounds to negotiate for more tuition. Just make sure to have the amounts and any receipts if possible. And is it possible to negotiate your tuition into getting a full ride? Yes, it is. This isn't as common, but we do see this. I think one student a couple years ago got $80,000 to go to Auburn. I think she was out of state too, which was a big win because usually out of state students don't get that much financial aid. Just yesterday, one of our advisors got another student $16,000. I'd say on average, most students get like $3,000 to $5,000 is what I've seen more recently. But yeah, you can negotiate your way into getting a full ride. And then let's see what the chat is. Any questions here? Okay, I think that's it. We can move forward towards scholarships. Okay, so finding scholarships. Where to find private scholarships? There are a number of different sources for scholarships. So your student organizations, sororities or fraternities, your department, community foundations. So these are local charities that are like hyper local. Like you have to have gone to a certain high school or be a resident of a specific county. So you usually do have high chances of winning these scholarships because the pool of eligible applicants is so small. Like for a Coca-Cola scholarship, that is open to all 20 million high school students in the country. But a North Texas Community Foundation scholarship is limited to only the people who live in North Texas. So I would Google like your county or your city and then community foundation to see what your local community foundation is, see if they offer scholarships and apply to those. And then there are also like local community organizations, so the Rotary Club, the Lions Club. Sometimes local businesses will offer scholarships, parents, employers, or unions. This one is, again, also pretty niche. I know there are companies like Amazon or I think like Dolly Parton Land or Chipotle that offer scholarships for employees, but sometimes they also offer scholarships for their employees' children. So look into that. And then there's also MOS. So we have spent years building our product, and it's a mobile app that matches you to private scholarships. We have an AI advisor that answers any questions about financial aid you have. And then we also match you to state aid. We provide that letter for negotiation. We also provide essay drafts to get you started when scholarships require essays. So we really try to make it as easy as possible for students to find and apply to financial aid. There is all this money that is out there, and we just want to provide students with the information and tools to get that money. So a few tips for winning scholarships: keep a list, try to stay organized. On MOS, you can update statuses of each scholarship so you know which ones you've saved, which ones you've started, which ones you've applied to. Try to keep track of application deadlines on a calendar or in your phone or wherever you check regularly. Create a detailed resume. There are also, you could go to your career center for help with resumes. There are also a bunch of sites online that are great at writing resume bullets. I actually did that for my own resume once with ChatGPT to see how it would do. And honestly, it was pretty good at writing them. So use AI to your advantage when you can. Write a personal statement. A lot of times these scholarships want to know like pretty generic things. So they want to know what you're passionate about, what you're interested in studying, what you want to do after you graduate, and why. You could write one essay kind of addressing all of those things and then tweak it a little bit for each application. And then that way you don't have to take all of the time and effort to write 7 different 500-word essays. You can just write one essay and tweak words. Like, we want to work smart, not hard. And then, yes, make sure to review your applications before you submit, especially if you are repurposing essays. Just make sure you are referencing the right scholarship provider or the right major, or like fully addressing the prompt and staying within whatever word or character limits. And then send thank you emails after interviews. This is something that I still do whenever I have conversations with partners or other people I've talked to or just like had a good meeting with. This goes a long way for people remembering who you are. So if you think about who a scholarship provider reviewer is, so someone who works for some charity and is reviewing hundreds or even thousands of scholarship applications, especially after you've had an interview with someone, like they're meeting lots of people, send a nice personalized thank you note. Reference something specific that you and that interviewer talked about in your notes, so that way they remember you. And then that way, when it does come to think about who the winner is, they ideally remember you based on that like personal touch. It's sort of like a reminder, like this follow-up email is sort of a reminder on, hey, here's who I am, here's what makes me special, here's why I deserve this. And then when they are deciding the winner, the person with more of those touch points is more likely to be remembered. And then, yeah, just keep asking around for new opportunities. I know school financial aid offices do have resources. A lot of times on your school website, you will have a list or some different scholarship sources. There are mentors, professors, departments that might have specific scholarships to you. So lots of different sources. It's a lot out there. And so that's why also sites like MOS or the College Board can be helpful in just aggregating all of that to one place. All right, so that is it on scholarships. Why don't we go answer a couple questions in the Q&A. Is this applicable for international students? So if you're an international student, you can't submit the FAFSA. You can't submit state aid because you're not a resident of that state, but you might still be able to get aid from your school. I think usually schools have like an international student department. And so I would go to that department, ask what financial aid they have for you. And a lot of times there are scholarships that are eligible for international students. Usually those are private scholarships. On MOS, I know what we do is when you're creating your account, we ask what country you're a citizen of. And so if you're a citizen of another country, we will show you matches for international students. And then do you provide assistance with writing any of these and applying to scholarships? Would a cover letter be close to a personal statement if it's more humanized? So MOS does provide assistance with writing essays and with writing those negotiation letters and with applying to scholarships. So from your phone, if you see a scholarship, you want to apply for it and has an essay, you can get help with that essay. So you answer a couple questions, you answer the prompt in your own words, you add any relevant details about yourself, and then you get a personalized essay draft, which you could send it as is, but we always recommend that students personalize it as much as possible to highlight your unique goals, your unique experiences, and why the scholarship really will make a difference in your life, just to make you stand out from the crowd. And then a cover letter is close to a personal statement. I don't write cover letters that often, candidly. I think cover letters are, at least in my experience, like this is not true for everyone, but in my experience, cover letters are not viewed as often as resumes are. Like, I think when you're applying for a job or when I'm looking at job candidates, I look at the resume. The cover letter is sort of like, in my view, fluff around the resume, but the resume is the true like facts about what this person has achieved, what their grades are, and what work experience they have. So I think a cover letter is like, you could repurpose a personal statement to make it into a cover letter. I'd say like use ChatGPT or one of those like AI companies to give you a head start and then like personalize it further, but it's not always needed. I think really focus on writing a strong resume that really shows how you've had real work experience and contributed something to that place that you worked. Do you have a list of writing scholarships I could get into? You can check MOS for writing scholarships. I don't have a list of scholarships off the top of my head. Dual citizenship, Mexican US citizen. So if you have dual citizenship, I would just focus on you being a US citizen because that makes you eligible for more things like the FAFSA, state aid, and institutional aid. And when you create your MOS account, if you have dual citizenship, but one of them is US, I would just put United States because then we're filtering you for all of the scholarships eligible for US citizens, which is a lot more. How many scholarships are better to apply for? It really depends. I think if you are applying to 50 easy apply scholarships, but they're essentially sweepstakes, unfortunately, your chances of winning those are probably pretty low. So sometimes, like depending on your situation, how much time you have, it might be better to apply to fewer scholarships, but ones that are more niche and sometimes take more work because it kind of weeds out other people who don't want to put in the effort. So yeah, I know it might be time consuming to submit or to write a 500-word essay and to submit a resume and to get 2 letters of recommendation. But if you put in that work and other people don't want to put in that work, and also that scholarship is for women in STEM, not all students in the US, then you probably have better chances of winning that scholarship. So it really just depends on you, how much time and effort you want to put into it, and what types of scholarships you're trying to go after. What can I do to get scholarships for 61-year-olds? I would search for that. I don't know how to find specific scholarships for these people besides just using MOS and using our search and filtering tools. I would say that the number of scholarships for adults, there are fewer of those than for students who are under 26. But I do know that there are scholarships out there, and there's this one student I've worked with, her name is Christine, and she is an adult going back to school. And I want to say that she's in her 60s as well. And she's been able to get financial aid through negotiation and through finding architecture scholarships, which is what she's majoring in. But yeah, using tools like MOS that allow you to search and filter versus you just Googling these things, at least helps you be a little more efficient with your time. All right, I attended college for the first time, early 2000s, finished my bachelor's. It's either receive grants or loans, so here are my chance of receiving more, hoping for as few loans as possible. So I think you are limited by how much in total you can get from the federal and state government. So if you've already received grants in the early 2000s, you might not receive as much in or as you're pursuing your current degree right now. That being said, if like here, I think is a really good case for negotiation because maybe on paper, your school might not want to give you additional aid, but you can explain your situation to your financial aid office and see what they can do. How can I request a waiver for parent student loan forgiveness? I'm not sure if they're still accepting waivers for that. I actually am not as familiar with loan forgiveness, but I would ask that question to support@mos.com and someone will get back to you. Can you explain what MOS is exactly? Yes, so MOS is a mobile app. So you can find MOS on the App Store. It's just spelled MOS. I think you can also check out, yeah, mos.com. But MOS is a financial aid app that helps students find money for college. So we help with private scholarships. We have the largest private scholarship database in the US. We match you to private scholarships so you don't have to spend time scrolling through some giant lists. And then we also help match you with which state aid you qualify for. We help with essays, we help with negotiation letters. We really just try to help students get all the money from all the different sources that they can. Okay, and then I see there's some chat messages. Oh yes, thank you, Elena, for putting the website there. So let's see what questions. I have MOS, haven't found a scholarship yet. I'm sorry that you haven't found a scholarship yet. We do have a lot on there, so I would say keep searching. Scholarships can be kind of seasonal. Like there are scholarships that are open year round, but from summer into fall, there aren't as many scholarships. A lot of them actually open in December and January, and those can be used for next year. So we're actually about to enter a period of a lot of scholarships opening, and then a lot of them will close around March or April. So hopefully, as we get closer into that time period, you'll see better fit scholarships. Okay, I have my son's student loans. It's parent loan. I'm schooled and I can't afford the loan. What about forgiveness? Yes, student loan forgiveness. I don't want to misspeak, but please put that question into support@mos.com and someone will help you. Scholarships for international students, we answered. Eligible for FAFSA for 2 years. Assuming I'm no longer eligible, but I can do a loan. Income change together. I think for the income change and no longer being eligible for FAFSA. So I just want to clarify something. The FAFSA is a form. Everyone can submit the form. When you submit the form, when you submit the FAFSA, then you are eligible, or you could be eligible for federal aid. So I think in this situation, you've been eligible for federal aid, meaning Pell Grants or FSEOG, for 2 years, but this year you're not. And it sounds like there was a change in your household income. So this is a situation where negotiation can come in really handy. So I encourage you to write a negotiation letter to your school's financial aid office, explain what the change in situation was and how that's impacted the household income so that you can ideally lower the SAI that you get from submitting the FAFSA so that you qualify for federal aid again. Any advice for finding financial aid before next spring? I think by spring, you mean the spring semester, so starting in January. I would say keep checking for scholarships. There will be more that open up later next year. So you can check for that. Another thing you can try to do, if you've already received your tuition bill or your financial aid offer for the spring semester, you can try to negotiate that if any situation has changed or any like special circumstances or hardships have come up. Can you please mention the scholarships offered to international students? You can check for scholarships for international students on MOS. I'm a dependent under my parents, but paying for college on my own without, at least until I get a job. Yes, I think that would count as a special circumstance if you're not receiving financial support from someone and now you're having to pay for college entirely on your own. That would be grounds for a special circumstance. And so I encourage you to write a negotiation letter to your school. So MOS is free to use. Our private scholarship database is free. The negotiation letter and essays, you get one free AI generated content a day for, so you can still use that for free. State aid matching is free and AI advisor is free. If you want to get really personalized help and work with a human advisor, then you can buy MOS Premium, which is $10 a month or $50 a year. And then you get paired with a human expert who will answer all of your unique questions and kind of guide you through all the steps that you need to take. Personal assistance to applicants while applying with the process. I think this question means, do you provide personal assistance to applying to college? We don't really provide college application help, but we do provide scholarship application help. So yeah, we provide for free a draft for scholarship essays. If you do work with MOS Premium, your advisor can review your scholarship essay and give you more feedback if that's something that you're interested in. But yeah, we help with scholarships and financial aid, not college applications. The MOS app does not have an option to talk to real advisors without paying for premium. So you do need to be on premium to talk to a human advisor. We also have a family plan. So that is $70 a year for 6 people. So if you and your friends all want to chip in, you could buy MOS Premium family plan as a group and then each get access to your own advisor. If I applied and it covers the entire year, should I apply next year? Will be automatically renewed. You should apply next year because it will not automatically be renewed. Your financial aid can change year to year. So it is really important to submit the FAFSA every year and make sure that any grants that you get are sufficient to cover how much you have to pay. Like your financial aid is not guaranteed every year. All right, I think that covers all questions and we are right at time.
We are right at time, and I want to just thank everybody for joining us today and being such a great audience and asking amazing questions. As we said before, we did record this session. We will send it out via email with a copy of the slides, so you all have access to any links that were mentioned throughout the presentation. I want to thank Jess for joining us today. You had such amazing advice for everybody. And, I think the biggest message that I've taken from today is definitely make sure to submit that FAFSA because it's really helpful for anyone who is, attending or hoping to go to college soon. Be really persistent, when you are working with your financial aid office on your campus. And keep in mind that these folks are busy, but they are there to help you. So, go talk to them and keep talking to them because they're there to help make sure that you are able to attend and pay for college. And then three, definitely check out MOS. They've got amazing free resources available. So, you can check out their scholarship search and all of the other great features that Jess mentioned today. And of course, if you need anything else, Upswing is always here to help you all. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us as well if you need anything. This is actually our last free webinar of the semester. I'm sure we'll be back again in the spring with more free webinars for all of our Upswing students. So keep an eye on your email, and if you have any ideas for additional free webinars, we'd love to hear them as we start planning our spring calendar. So reach out to us, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks
Thanks,
again.
Elena. Thanks, everyone. Take care.